Welcome to G5 Classified, your one-stop shop for all things Group of 5 college football. Stepping up to the microphone are your hosts, Gabe Kuhn and Kyron Samuels. Now, let's talk some G5 football.
We are rolling. Episode 15 of G5 Classified is here. Gabe Kuhn alongside Kyron Samuels. We have a lot on the show today. Guest-wise, we're going to have Gloria Nevarez, the Mountain West Conference Commissioner, first commissioner on the show that we have had this season. So that'll be fun to talk about because they're sort of in the middle of some lawsuits and realignment discussion that I'm sure is sort of fresh on everybody's mind. I can't imagine, at least I've been told off air, that we're going to be able to get Gloria to speak on ongoing litigation because of the lawsuit they're dealing with exit fees and everything else. But we will talk about that once we get off with Gloria. But Kyron, what's happening, man? You got the CUSA? You're rocking the CUSA beanie right now? The brand is strong or what? What's happening, brother?
Little paid promo. I'm just kidding. Nah, no paid promo. But not just rocking the CUSA beanie. It's cold here in Jacksonville, man. It's been dipping into the low 30s, and sometimes we get into the high 20s at night. I'm not used to this super cold weather, but I'm glad to be talking about some football again. We're starting to get back into football. I know we had like a week here away where we didn't have a ton of games. We had some FCS games that were really cool. We had Army versus Navy that turned out to be an upset. Navy, ended up pretty much beating the dog crap out of Army there, kind of ruining that whole vibe. But now we're back into it. We have bowl games that are kicking up already, and we're going right to the playoffs this weekend. So I'm excited.
What's that about the AAC, man? The American, like looking at Navy beating Army and Tulane just laying an egg against Army and Memphis to end the year. Memphis was the best team all along. They just couldn't capitalize in the biggest moments, man. Losing to UTSA and Navy, we'll talk about it a little bit later. But brother, you had so much to accomplish. You still had 11 wins after that win against West Virginia, but 11 wins feels like not good enough to a lot of the fans, which is insane to even think about. But it still is a hell of an accomplishment. But it feels like Memphis was the team all along, unfortunately.
Yeah, it's a great place to be in if you're a program, though. I mean, where 11-2 is seemed as kind of disappointing. You're going to finish the season in the top 25 with an 11-2 record and a bowl victory, and that's kind of like falling short. That's a good place to be. You've built the program up to a certain level and a certain standard where that's kind of considered missing the mark a little bit. So good prospects going towards to the future. But we'll think about this year for a long time if they're not able to get back to this point and have this type of opportunity.
Now, I know who's disappointed, the people that wanted Ashton Jeanty to win the 2024 Heisman. Travis Hunter takes the 2024 Heisman. It was very close. It was the closest voting since 2009. It was very close.
2 year.
The final tally points-wise, Travis Hunter had 2,231, Ashton Jeanty 2,017. So it was very tight in the grand scheme.
The first place votes were a bit of a discrepancy, but the second, third, and fourth place were dominated by Jeanty.
And some of the second, third, and fourth place votes were a joke, brother. What are we doing?
The fact that Dylan Gabriel had first place votes, the fact that Bryson Daly from Army had first place votes. There's some people not taking this thing seriously here. We need to talk about that as well. There's also 20 plus people. No, excuse me. There's also 19 people that have a vote that didn't even submit a ballot.
Right.
And those people need to have their votes taken for sure.
Yeah, and then Cam Scatabo had 3 first-place votes.
Come on, what are we doing, man?
I love Cam Scatabo. He's really fun. But if you're voting for a running back to win Heisman, it's Ashton Jeanty or nothing. There was no debate. Like Cam Scatabo shouldn't have even entered the conversation with some of these people. But it's embarrassing, as we see with a lot of postseason awards, whether it's the NBA, NFL. You see how people vote, and it kind of embarrasses you in the grand scheme of things. But Travis Hunter ends up winning, and to me, Kyron, really what this signifies is, quite frankly, Colorado's here. Travis Hunter has shown that he was the best player in college football all season. And I think it really has highlighted a lot more Colorado hate than I wanted to see in the grand scheme of things. He is unbelievably deserving of this award. Quite frankly, I didn't think the voting should be this close. I feel like if his coach was not Coach Prime and he didn't play for Colorado, it probably would have been a wider margin because people sort of hold that bias against him. But all of the arguments for Ashton Jeanty, while valid, are still a little bit disingenuous when you compare it to Travis Hunter. And what it comes down to me is I've seen 30 players in the modern era run for 2,000 yards. I saw Melvin Gordon run for 2,500 yards on an 11-win Wisconsin team not too long ago, where he had 29 touchdowns, the same amount of touchdowns that Ashton Jeanty has. Kevin Smith in early 2000s ran for 2,500 yards. He didn't win the Heisman on a really good UCF team right when they came over from the FCS level. I understand what Ashton Jeanty has done is historic, and he's got a chance to really solidify himself in the record books, potentially break Barry Sanders' record with a couple extra games. But in the end of the day, I've seen 30 guys run for 2,000 yards in the modern era. I have never seen, until now, someone become a All-American at cornerback and wide receiver in the same year, a guy who in the Big 12 Conference won Offensive Player of the Week and Defensive Player of the Week in the same season. I've never seen somebody catch for 1,000 yards while still being top 10 in PBUs on the defensive side of the ball. In the end of the day, all of the arguments against Travis Hunter are disingenuous because we've never seen what we saw this season. And I think that's the reason you give him this award, and he probably should have ran away with it just by a little bit more.
Yeah, I thought the margin deserved to be wider, but I'm happy that it's not, for the simple fact that people can't play the narrative that nobody gave Jeanty his respect. Nobody said Jeanty had a great year, which, I mean, we've talked about this before, but the only reason Boise State is in the playoff right now is because Ashton Jeanty's on their ball club.
Sure.
If they were the same 12-1 ball club without Ashton Jeanty, they'd probably be on the outside looking in right now because they wouldn't have been ranked this high all season long. The only reason they're in the playoffs is because people have given him his proper respect and ranked Boise State appropriately because of that. That being the side, Travis Hunter deserves this award, man. I'm happy that the voting was close in totality, but the first place votes was a significant gap. I believe Travis had over 170 more first place votes, and that kind of widened the margin a little bit in terms of who people saw as the best player. So I'm happy about that. But you're 100% correct. He was the best player in college football all season long to me. After the UCF game is when I kind of gave it up. I'm like, hey, he's catching touchdowns. He's making these crazy plays, these breaks on the ball, getting interceptions. He has 2 or 3 pass breakups. Like, he's not just playing snaps. I hate the people that are like, snaps are not a stat. For one, yes, they are. Every coach in America, every team.
If they're impactful, if every snap is impactful, yes, they are.
Right. And even just from a workload standpoint, every program in America from Division I to FB to FCS to D2 to JUCO keeps a record of how many snaps their players play just for health purposes. Hey, we might have a linebacker that's getting we might play 4-3 and this outside linebacker is getting 40 snaps a game, and we notice by the 40th snap he's not as effective as he was on snap 1. Well, there's a reason they keep statistics of all these things, because it's not normal to do this.
Right.
What Travis Hunter did, playing 110 to 120, 130 snaps a game sometimes, is just unfathomable. And to do that and be impactful on all of those reps is the thing that kind of separates him. I think the fact that he was doing it was one thing, but the fact that you're doing it and you're dominating is just a whole other thing that we didn't even really take into account. But I'm happy that he won because he deserved it. And we can talk all day about why he deserves it. But the proof is in the pudding, and I think this season is going to age tremendously well over the course of time.
And there's 2 things that I really want to hype up here that I think a lot of people are leaving out of the conversation for the most part. One, you talk about all the snaps he plays. Think about all of the offensive and defensive sort of structures and plays and calls that he has to remember. You have to understand how smart of a football player it takes. Like, you have to be a brilliant football mind to be able to play both sides of the ball at that level and understand the play calls coming in from the sideline, where you need to be, how you need to play certain things, and do it at a high level. That is so much information to take in. That is insane to even think about. That would be information overload for 99.9% of people, of all these student athletes playing in college football. But for Travis Hunter, it won that. Also, when you talk about Ashton Jeanty, sure, Boise State wouldn't be number 3 right now in the college football playoff with a bye and have a chance to play for a national championship if it weren't for Ashton Jeanty. So you talk about his impact, and I'm not going to leave his impact out of this. His impact was felt greatly by that Boise State team, and they needed it, and he went way, way beyond any type of expectation you could have set for him in the preseason. But also, let's not sit here and act like Travis Hunter didn't have a similar, if not more, impactful stay at Colorado. Right. They were 1-11 2 years ago. They're 9-3 now. If not just, if you don't want to just talk about the stats, 1,152 yards receiving, 14 touchdowns, both top 10 in the country. If you don't want to talk about his top 10 pass breakups in the country, he was up there with interceptions as well. You don't want to talk about the stats, just talk about culture and the change that he and Shedeur Sanders and Coach Prime helped facilitate there.
Yep.
He had just about as much, if not more, impact than Ashton Jeanty in turning around what Colorado was in what 2022. So
yep.
I can hear what you're saying about the impact that Ashton Jeanty had, but don't sit there in the same breath and deny the impact that Travis Hunter has had on that Colorado program. Now, moving on, we do have the college football playoff coming up, and this weekend we're going to have one Friday night game. That will be Indiana and Notre Dame. And then we're going to have the rest of the 3 games on Saturday. So I just sort of want to get into a couple of different questions here regarding these games. Let's start with the most intriguing. Which game is the most intriguing to you where you're going? I mean, you'll probably watch everything cover to cover. Don't get it twisted. But which game is the most intriguing to you?
Well, it's hands down Tennessee versus Ohio State,
yeah.
right? Before you even get to the game, the fact that Tennessee fans have reportedly, this is from the Ohio State AD's mouth himself, purchased 30% of the tickets already in a stadium that seats over 100,000. There figures to be a strong Tennessee Vols presence in that game, which kind of speaks to the culture of Tennessee and how they're going to travel and their expectation for this game. This is not just the game that people are going to experience and say, hey, we saw a playoff game. This is a game that people are expecting them, or they expect to go up there and win, for one. And two, flip side that for Ohio State, we know what the implications are for Ryan Day and this Ohio State team. They have the most NIL money allegedly invested in this roster, upwards of $18 to $21 million is what's been reported. And that doesn't even figure in the staff when you talk about the guys they've added to the staff, like Chip Kelly, Jim Knowles, over the course of the seasons, where they have heavily invested into a situation like this, where they're able to get into a playoff, host a home playoff game, and now all the chips are on the table. If you go 10-3 with the most talented roster in college football, and you lose your last game, one to a 6-5 Michigan team, and then to a Tennessee team coming up, a SEC team, because we all know the narratives that'll play. Can't go in the cold, can't go on the road, all that stuff. If you go in there and lose to a Tennessee team who is not used to being on the stage, the last time Tennessee was in a playoff or a championship scenario was 1997 when T. Martin won the national championship for Tennessee. So they haven't been in these situations very often. If you lose this game, to me, this is a death stamp for Ryan Day. I know there's been some speculation. The AD's kind of talked about it, that he may end up coming back regardless. But if he loses this game, the fire is going to be hotter than it's ever been. And that's why it's the most intriguing matchup, because of the stakes. Before we even get into the players and the X's and O's, everything that surrounds this game is extremely important for both these programs.
Yeah, I 100% agree. That is the most intriguing. But I'm going to go with Clemson and Texas as well. I think Clemson and Texas can be interesting. And the fact that, like, Texas is just – they're the biggest favorite in the first round. Like, that's insane to me. 12-point favorites. To be honest with you, outside of their 2 Georgia games, they're not very well battle-tested. They haven't really shown me that they're that damn impressive so far this year. I'm not saying Clemson is by any stretch of the imagination, but what I can tell you about them, they've been running the ball relatively well. Their O-line's been a lot better this year. Cade Klubnik's had a better season. That defense is still sturdy when they need to be. I like, this matchup and what it could potentially be. And I feel like this is sort of the opportunity for Dabo Swinney to show, hey, I'm still here. It's as much as you guys have written me off, I still am around and in the conversation, and you cannot ignore me every single year, as we sort of assumed we'd be able to do the past few years, the way things have played out. But also on the other side, Texas and Sark, this is a damn important game. You lost to Washington last year in the college football playoff. You have not been able to sort of get over the top and sort of show anybody this year that you are the team to beat in college football, even though we assume that going into the season. I think this is a massive game for Steve Sarkisian, and then also for Quinn Ewers in this quarterback room. Well, we'll see how this all plays out. Quinn Ewers has to show up in a big moment, and to this point, I don't. More often than not, he plays pedestrian, I guess is the nice word of the nice word to throw out there in these massive games. Kai, is that fair? He's sort of pedestrian in these big games, besides the one last year on the road against Alabama.
Yeah, I mean, Quinn, the first half of Alabama in 2022, the Alabama game 2023, and the Michigan game this season when he went to Ann Arbor. That's the peak Quinn, right? We've seen it happen before. The problem is there's 30 other starts in between there where he's just like, Sometimes he's really good. Oklahoma State Big 12 championship game, he was very good, but I'm not rating that Oklahoma State team that high. And the rest of the time, you get a guy that's fluctuating in between a guy that looks like he shouldn't be on the field and just a pedestrian starter, like you said. So the variance in performance from Quinn Ewers is the most intriguing part about that game, because if he has a Quinn game, a vintage Quinn game, they can blow these guys out. I talked about it on radio on early here back here in Alabama. They asked me what the stakes are for teams playing 4 extra games, and I was like, maybe not for the teams, it doesn't mean much, but for individuals, it can mean a lot. A guy like Quinn Ewers, if he goes on a run here and lights it up for 4 straight games and wins a national championship, that completely changes his outlook and the way people perceive him, 1, for his college career, and 2, his NFL draft status. I think it's important for guys like him to have this extra stage and to be playing on these type of stages so he can like bolster his status. He's going to be trying to play the best he's ever played. So I think that's intriguing from there. I still expect Texas to roll in this game simply because a team like Clemson, I watch them play, they shoot themselves in the foot too many times to win against really good teams. I think SMU is a decent team. SMU, we talked about it. They had the worst P4 strength of schedule. They're 0-2 versus ranked teams, all that good stuff. But I think they were a talented enough team where you can kind of gauge.
And Clemson let them climb back in.
Right. And if you do that, if you make those same mistakes against Texas defense is good enough to where they won't let you breathe. They're going to get after you. They have Anthony Hill and those pass rushers, and they have Jahdae Barron, Andrew Makuba, and Muhammad in that secondary. I don't think they can make the same mistakes. But like you said, if Dabo was able to get this win, it's a massive signal to the rest of college football. He just took a transfer portal wide receiver that he's kind of still here and he's adapting. On the other hand, if you go 11-3 with the investment that you have at Texas, and you go 0-3 versus ranked teams, it's a signal to Texas that, hey, you have a long way to go and you're not quite as close to the championship as you thought you were. So that's another intriguing matchup.
The problem with Quinn Ewers, you brought up the Michigan game. Great game. Early season, on the road, good defense, mostly completely healthy defense, I believe, at that point for Michigan. Will Johnson was still on the field. You still had Mason. Everybody was playing. But then let's go to the Red River rivalry. That was basically Quinn Wisner handling business for Texas. Quinn Ewers, 20 for 29, 199, 1 TD, 1 interception. Right. Then you go to the Georgia game, the first Georgia game. We know how bad that was.
Right.
He figured it out in the second half, but the first half was terrible. But he was 25 for 43, 211, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. Against A&M, very pedestrian. Very, very pedestrian. 17 for 28, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. And then in the SEC title game, he ended that obviously OT, and it was well-fought game, fun game, but 27 for 46, 358, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. And now he got pressured a fair amount, sacked 6 times. So there's a nuance to all of this. When you're playing a better team, it's hard to put up a good stat line. We understand that. But in those big games, it's more often than not, he sort of lays an egg. But we'll see what he does against Clemson. Now, let's move on. Most likely upset. I'll go ahead and start this one. I think it's Friday night. Indiana on the road in South Bend against Notre Dame. Notre Dame 7-point favorites. But the problem I look at here is, can Riley Leonard go ahead and use his arm to go beat Indiana? It's that simple. They're a top 10 rushing offense, but on the other side, Indiana is phenomenal at run defense. They are number 1 in the country, only allowing 77 yards per game on the ground. I think that Indiana can neutralize a lot of the stuff that Notre Dame's been doing on this massive run after that Northern Illinois loss. But we'll see how it all plays out, because Riley Leonard is more than talented enough to go make something happen through the air. He's just got to show us that. But I do think this Notre Dame defense is going to pose a lot of problems for Indiana. I want to see if Indiana's wide receivers can win downfield. I think they have a potential to do that. We know that Notre Dame and Benjamin Morrison's been out just about the entire year with that torn ACL. So they're down a body. They've been down a body, even though that hasn't mattered all that much. But can Indiana's offense get up and running? I think this game's going to be a lot closer than what people think.
Yeah, this is a game to me that, I talked about this on radio as well a couple hours ago, but this is a game to me that is like the battle of styles. Notre Dame typically starts slow. And if they start slow, it could be a long day for them, because Indiana's a team outside of that Ohio State game that starts fast, finishes fast. They have, one of the biggest point differentials in the country this year. They beat a lot of teams by 10-plus points. When they are rolling, they're very tough to defend on offense, and they make plays on defense, take the ball away. As you mentioned, they have a very good run defense. The thing that I'm interested to see is that Indiana hasn't been tested a whole lot this season. The Nebraska game, which they ended up blowing away, and Nebraska turned out to be a 6-6 ball club, doesn't look as impressive today as it did then. The Michigan game, struggled a little bit. Michigan finished a 7-5 team. They squeaked that one out late. Then we know what happened at the Ohio State game. So the 3 games that they were quote unquote tested this year, they looked great in one of them against Nebraska. They looked okay in passing against Michigan, and then they looked bad against Ohio State. So I'm excited to see them because I think Notre Dame's a bit more battle tested. Notre Dame's played. I mean, we might not look at them as great wins, but they dominated Navy, they dominated Army. They went to Kyle Field and beat Texas A&M, who ended up at 8-14.
Yep.
And they went to USC and blew USC out, but it was a 3-score game late, ended up being a 2-score win. They won by 14 points in that ball game. But they've been tested against more quality teams and more quality defenses their offense is going against. So I think this is the most likely upset because of the style. I'm not sure that Notre Dame is built to fight back from behind. But if they being Indiana comes out to a fast start, I think that's their best chance to win. So I think that could happen, and I'm interested to see it because, like you said, I mentioned it about Quinn Ewers, but this is a stage for Riley Leonard as well. If he's able to go and light it up and have a couple of big games, he'll be right back in that first round conversation. So big stakes for them, and I'm excited for this one as well because all Indiana matchup too, we're going to see a really cool atmosphere there as well.
It kind of reminds me of 2022 TCU versus Michigan, right? Where everybody just assumed the higher seeded team was going to be able to handle business. This was an upstart program. They're not ready yet. That's what TCU was. That's what Indiana is. Obviously, I think different styles, but I think there is definitely a pathway for Indiana to go win this game, and I don't think a lot of people are talking about it as much as they should be. Now, coaching carousel news. Let's start with the big one, and I'm just going to throw it to you, brother. Bill Belichick, North Carolina. He has been hired by North Carolina. He's going to wear the Tar Heel blue on the sideline next year. He is taking his talents to college after winning 6 Super Bowls and taking a year off of coaching. The sort of deal itself, 5 years, $50 million. And then there is a lot of addendums in said contract. One of them being that Steve Belichick is supposed to be the next coach at North Carolina. He's the coach in waiting. So Bill's son should be the next coach at North Carolina. What do you think about, let's just start with bare bones, surface level, Bill Belichick and the college game. Do you think it jives? Do you think it fits? We know at the NFL level, he became sort of a dinosaur by the end of his career with the Patriots once Tom Brady left and he didn't have a lot of good free agent signings at the end. So how do you see that part of it going? Bill Belichick coaching college level, college age, 18 to 22-year-old kids.
I don't have many reservations about it. I know a lot of people are hung up on some of the stuff you talk about there, maybe his ability to translate to kids. But if you're going to North Carolina, if you're opting to stay in North Carolina, you know what you're getting yourself into. It's going to turn into an NFL prep academy. That's what it's going to turn into.
Right.
And that's probably the biggest selling point. I don't think he's going to have problem recruiting. And they've also talked about bumping the NIL allotment up from, it was reported at $4 to $5 million this season to 18 to 20 million. So if that is true, if that is accurate, if they're able to follow through with that, that'll be comparable with what's been reported from the top schools in the country. And I want to read this off because this is the biggest thing, right? I'm looking at their 2025 schedule. They have TCU at home, at Charlotte, host Richmond, at UCF, at Cal, at NC State, host Clemson, host Duke, host Stanford, host Virginia, at Syracuse, at Wake Forest. There's not one game on that schedule that I don't think that they could win. I mean, if you're talking about a favorable schedule, your toughest matchup is going to be hosting Clemson at home. Maybe hosting Duke will be your second matchup. They're going to have a team that's talented. They've already had fielded teams that are comparable and that have competed with these teams already. If you're looking at Bill and his ability to get some players, I don't think that's going to be a struggle. And if he's able to implement, if the kids are able to retain their information, because that's first, it's not going to be the same as he was in the NFL where you have
to dumb some things down.
Right. But if he's able to implement enough, can you imagine some of these true freshman quarterbacks or these transfer quarterbacks coming in and facing a Bill Belichick defense? I mean, it's going to make their head spin. It's going to be a great coaching matchup. So I'm excited to see this because I think, one, the schedule is favorable, and two, he's going to be able to get talent there. People are going to want to go play for Bill Belichick. People are going to be able to. It's not hard to sell Chapel Hill as a college town.
His name moves mountains, brother. Right. So, like, if you're worried about his getting players, don't worry about it. He's already got a high 4-star quarterback committed. He's got the best JUCO running back potentially committed and heading to North Carolina. Like, he's going to get players. And North Carolina has more than enough money to go make that happen. And the selling point, you're going to have an all NFL coaching staff. And the way I see it, Kai, and maybe this is just so simpleton of me, but like, I want to know your thoughts on this. You're getting a top 5 coach of all time who's still hungry. Why would you not make that hire? I feel like regardless of age, you're getting a top 5 head coach of all time. We can debate that, but certainly top 5 to top 7 who still wants to coach. Like, this is not like a retread, nasty hire like you sort of did with Mac Brown. Mac Brown had been to the top of the mountain, came back down, and maybe didn't have the same hunger. And you see that with a lot of coaches who step down. You saw it with Gus Malzahn going to UCF. You see it. It happens constantly where these retread coaches don't really have the same type of heart that they had originally. But Bill Belichick still loves this stuff, man. Bill Belichick's still hungry as ever, even at 72 years old. And he doesn't necessarily he's a empty nester. He's got a 24-year-old girlfriend. Like, he's got all the time in the world on his hands. This is not like a family man who devotes his life to going back home and kicking it with his family. He's got all the time in the world at 72 years old to just focus on football and recruiting and all that goes with college football in 2024 and 2025. So again, top 5 coach, still hungry. I just feel like you have to make that move if you're North Carolina.
Resources are a big part of college football too. So he allegedly has the resources too. So there would be no excuse for him not to produce at least an 8-win team, in my opinion. First year, 8 wins is totally doable, especially with this schedule, especially in the ACC.
Sure.
I don't see it being that much of a problem.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of people, man. There's a lot of people doubting this just based on the very end of Bill Belichick's career in the NFL.
Yeah.
One, NFL and college football are completely different. You can hoard more talent in college football. And also, I think we do a little bit of revisionist history, kind of have this mix up in our mind of the end of Bill Belichick's career. Yeah. He did go 10-7 with Mac Jones and make the playoffs one year. Then he went 8-9. Then he bottomed out at 4-13 and he was done.
Yeah.
So, that's what the end was. It was 10-7, 8-9, 4-13. I'm stepping
Still
away.
Had one of the best.
It's not like he had 4 or 5 years at the end where he's winning 2 and 3 games per year. He still had a competitive enterprise going in New England by the end.
Yeah, and one of the better defenses in the NFL too. The defense never tapered off that much. It was the offense. It was losing Tom Brady. It was losing Rob Gronkowski. It was losing those offensive linemen that kind of wore down the team over the course of the period. They missed on some quarterbacks. Even though Mac did, fairly well his first season, you move Matt Patricia from defensive line or defensive coordinator to offensive coordinator. That was some suspect stuff. But
yes,
like we said,
and then it is by the way his first hire at North Carolina, of course, Matt Patricia,
Michael Lombardi.
Well, Michael Lombardi, but then Matt Patricia's there as a personnel guy.
Right.
He can't quit Matt Patricia.
Right. But I think overall, man, like you said, too many people are doubting this guy. He didn't bottom out, man. He had one poor season, and it was basically the signal that, hey, this might be the time for us to move on as a franchise. And I can't blame them. They had a guy that they liked in Gerard Mayo. They had a pick coming up where they picked their quarterback in Drake May. I think it was best for both in that situation. But like you said, he's still hungry, and he's still Bill Belichick at the end of the day.
Yeah.
So he's already campaigning. He started to adapt a little bit. He's doing the Manning cast. He's doing the YouTube stuff where he's putting himself out there. He's doing Pat McAfee show, recruiting already. I think he gets it enough to where he's like, there's some meat on the bone here, and I'm going to take it.
Well, worst comes to worst. Can we just be honest too? Eyes of the college football, national, all the eyes are on North Carolina now. So you accomplish something just by hiring the guy, and I think that's fine too.
Yeah, that TCU versus North Carolina game week 1 is going to be one of the highest view games. Right. It's going to be like when Deion went to Colorado and they got to host TCU that first game, and it was 4 or 5 million people watched it, whatever it was. North Carolina is going to be one of the most highly viewed teams next year. So at the very least, we're going to get some great entertainment out of this.
100%. Now elsewhere, you had a coach. You have a coach here in Jacksonville who went back home to West Virginia, Rich Rodriguez. Yep. Who I believe, let me make sure I have the stats directly in front of me. When he was at West Virginia, He was, I believe I have it 30-16. Is that correct?
Yep.
I believe I have it 30-16, but he returns there. He was there from 01 to 07, did a good job at Jacksonville State. He's headed back there. I'll get to the other, reunited and it feels so good example. But what do you think about Rich Rod headed back to West Virginia? I know he's an alum there. He's coached there before. I heard him talking on the broadcast when they were playing their bowl game. He said, I never should have left in the first place. So what do you think about this?
I'm happy for him, man. There should be nobody here at Jacksonville State that feels raw about it. This is what happens.
60-26, by the way. I was way off. That was the most ridiculous.
He's been successful pretty much everywhere he's been outside of Louisiana Monroe. I believe he's the seventh highest. Well, he has the seventh highest winning percentage for active head coaches. So he's been as successful as you could hope for. He's had teams like West Virginia in the opportunity with the chance to win a national championship before. We know how that played out of that Pitt game that last season before he left, but he's done well, man. He's come to Jacksonville State. Won a conference championship his first season in the ASUN, went 9-4, won a bowl game in our first year as an FBS program, made history, the first program in FBS history to ever do that. And then the third year he follows it up, goes 9-4, 9-3, wins a Conference USA championship in the first year as a Conference USA program officially. There's nothing to be raw about. I mean, he saw an opportunity to go back to his hometown, his home state. He's an alum of West Virginia. He helped build that football program to what we know it is today. There's nothing people should feel raw about. For Jacksonville State, it's a situation where you have to be prepared for this. I mean, high-level FCS programs and good G5 programs, they get coaches poached all the time. It's the nature of the beast. It's part of the business. I believe he's making a little bit over $1 million a year at Jacksonville State. He's going to be making 3.5 in his first year, and that's going to grow every year, and he'll have a chance to get it up to $5 million if he's able to win, hit some incentive marks, and maybe I think it's win the conference or get to a bowl game. So if anybody in their profession gets a chance to get a 300% pay increase, they're going to take it. Yeah, I mean, come on, let's 100%. Just be honest about that.
And to go back home too, to go back where you have all those memories, it's a no-brainer.
I was about to say, and then you build in the fact that he gets to go back home with his son, who's now going to be on the staff with him, with his daughter, who's going to work in the creative department, with his wife that is from there. I mean, it's a no-brainer. So I'm happy for him. I think they'll be able to get some really good players, and they're going to have a lot of money, man. Pat McAfee and those donors, Pac-Man Jones is boosting for him now. He has a ton of – Pat White has already come out and said he wants to come back and work for him under that staff. He's not going to have any shortage of resources and the people at his disposal to make it work in this modern age of college football. And the offense is conducive to quarterbacks and running backs. If you're a quarterback and a running back that wants to succeed, you're a dual-threat guy, West Virginia is going to be an attractive destination.
Buddy, he found dudes back in the day, brother.
Yeah, I mean,
Steve Slayton, Pat White, Noel Devine.
I know he didn't play Arizona.
Noel Devine didn't play for him, I don't think, very much, but he was recruited by Rich Rod originally. Yep. So, he had some guys. And that run, and by the way, that's the win-loss record, I was way off. 60-26 is what he was at West Virginia from 01 to 07. But that was really fun football.
Oh, man.
I have some really good memories from watching Pat White just run all over the field. He ran for 1,300 yards one year. I think Steve Slayton had another 1,000. It was awesome to watch. By the way,
fullback.
Jacksonville, it was Owen Schmidt.
Yeah, Owen Schmidt beat that fullback.
Yeah. Is he going to take some guys from Jacksonville State, curiously?
I believe a couple of guys will go over. I know a lot of guys have entered the portal, but the interesting thing about that is a ton of those guys, I believe there's up to 20 guys that are in the portal now, but most of them are going to play in the bowl game on Friday morning against Ohio. Right. So I thought that was an interesting thing. But he's going to get some players, man. And like you mentioned, he's been able to acquire talent and identify talent everywhere he's been. Even when he was at Arizona, man, Khalil Tate was in Heisman conversations when he was there with Rich Rod at Arizona. He found Tyler Huff from Furman to come to Jacksonville State this past season. He won Conference USA Player of the Year. He found Trey Stewart, the running back from a D2 program, who ran for 1,600 yards and 23 touchdowns this season at Jacksonville State. So identifying the talent has never been a problem for him. And I think it's going to just be built upon at West Virginia. It's a great situation for him to go into. And the Big 12 is not a conference that is overly dominant in any aspect. There's no one team hovering over the top of the pack where they can't be competitive year one.
Yeah. Now Scott Frost is the other guy returning back to where he originally was, and he was a guy who was the bane of my existence when he was there originally because I was playing alongside his teams at UCF. He went 6-7 year one, but 13-0 in year two with a win over Auburn in the Peach Bowl. I remember the 2017 AAC title game, 62-55 double overtime. Remember, it was like this yesterday. I was crying like a little baby after the game because of what his team was able to do. But obviously, after a stint at Nebraska where he was 16-31, he was out of head coaching for a couple of years. He's returning back to it at UCF, where he found his only success as a head coach, and it was tremendous success. Don't get it twisted. He turned around a program that was completely decimated after the George O'Leary years. Just, yep. I mean, an 0-for team. They won 0 games the year before he got there. He turned around to 6-7 and 13-0 very quick before Josh Heupel took over. I don't know what to think about this second time, the second time through, because he's had a chance to make up for the ills of Nebraska, and that was at Florida Atlantic. Now, I know it's harder to do things at Florida Atlantic, but good coaches have shown us, Lane Kiffin in the past, that you can do something at Florida Atlantic. You can win some games, but they were a relative, to me, based on the talent they brought in and the transfer portal and everything. They were a relative disappointment the 2 years that Scott Frost was there. And he tried the Casey Thompson thing at quarterback position. He never really got it right. So I just wonder how this second stint at UCF is going to go. I'm sure he'll get a few players here and there, but I just don't know if I'm fully buying into recapturing the 2017 magic that was at Central Florida. It just doesn't seem like a realistic proposition to me. He was doing that a lot. A lot of those guys that he was able to go win championships with were George O'Leary recruits. And it was just like the perfect storm in 2017, wasn't it? You had Shaquem Griffin, you had Mackenzie Milton, you had really good players on the defensive side of the ball everywhere. Yeah. I'm forgetting the name of the corner at this particular moment, but he was phenomenal. You had Gabe Davis, you had Jordan Akins. You just had so much talent on that particular team, and that's why you're able to get to 13-0. Then you got the big job. But it's just hard for me to imagine him sort of building this thing from scratch, because it's not in the best sort of shape right now. You just went up a level in the Big 12. You were not good this year. You're a 4-8 team. You're going to have to turn that around, and you're going to have to turn it around fast. And I don't know if Scott Frost is the guy to do that. He's done it once, but can you do it twice? It's a lot harder the second time around.
Yeah, it's harder the second time around, but I'm on the fence here. I was really excited when they announced it. When we have the opportunity to reinvigorate a fan base, to reinvigorate a donor base at a place like UCF, that is a gold mine waiting to be tapped. He's talked about it a little bit. There's a ton of room for expansion. I believe they have the 6th largest enrollment out of all universities in the country.
Yeah,
it's there in Orlando. There's a ton of positive things to sell UCF on, right? And he may be the guy to get people to believe again. And once you have the belief, then you can get investment. Once you have investment, then money talks more than anything these days in college football. So I'm hopeful that he'll be able to get good players in there. And like we said, the Big 12 is not overly dominant at the top to where you can't have a 2-year run and turn it around. But I'm discouraged when I see a hire like Alex Grinch as the defensive coordinator.
Oh, that's exactly that's a fair point. He is going the Alex Grinch route at defensive coordinator.
So I mean, Alex Grinch has some success at Wazoo, but everywhere else he's been has been a disaster. I'm just going to be straight honest about it. His last 2 seasons at USC were 2 of the worst defenses in USC history. They finished bottom quadrant. I believe there are I'm misquoting it, but it's either 117th or 118th in total defense. And there's only 132 eligible Division I teams to be qualified for these rankings. So probably the worst Power 4 defense in college football for 2 seasons. So when you're banking on that, it's a little bit difficult to see that working out if I'm just reading the tea leaves and going off of history. But we know Scott Frost is able to do some really good things offensively if he's able to get some guys. Even at Nebraska, man, they had I believe you said 16-31 record, but how many one-score games did they lose? I mean, they lost so many one-score games. They were
still
so
lost
close.
them.
Yeah, I mean, you lost them, but at least we can kind of sell the fact that I can put a competitive ball team out there. That's not going to be good enough for very long, especially now that UCF is in the Big 12. You're able to make a 12-team playoff now. There's ramifications that weren't there before. If this was a job and it was another G5 program and you're trying to build them back up, you have a little bit more leeway. But now you've seen, Colorado and Coach Prime. I know that's a unique example, but
sure,
Colorado and Coach Prime. Even Norvell struck gold and had a really good portal hit that season. And Florida State went 13-1. We've seen teams like Lane Kiffin and Ole Miss take Ole Miss from a middling team to a 10-win team, 11-win team. Now they're 9-3 again, right on the outskirts of the playoffs. There's too many examples now of coaches coming in and restarting the train fast for him to get any leeway. So even you look at a guy like Matt Rule, who's back in Nebraska. Matt Rule probably has one more season before he's on the hot seat because he hasn't been able to really turn the fortunes around there. So it's an interesting situation. And I think that Scott Frost has a good path to success. I'm just not 100% sure that we'll see him get there, and he'll have 2-3 years max to get it done.
Yeah. Now, granted, an extra season. Talking about extra season, talking about Matt Rule. How about Diego Pavia? Well, this is not necessarily he was granted an extra season, but he was given a preliminary injunction that would allow him to play another season in court today. After he basically argued, look, I can make $1 million more at NIL if I come back for a year at Vanderbilt. You guys should be letting me take that opportunity. If Andy wants it, I want it. Everybody wants it. Yep. And the reason he was able to argue this, and this is wild, and I'm sure you have plenty to say about this, Guy, because you went this route as well. He's saying JUCO years should not count against his eligibility, which is a different type of argument than we've heard in history. And if this is something that ultimately holds up in court and we have to go by, JUCO recruiting is going to take on a whole different meaning. It really will, because you're going to have still 4 potential years.
Yep.
Once you get done at a JUCO, if you're a top JUCO recruit, you're going to have plenty of time to go make an impact at that next level in D1 football.
Yep. I think JUCOs will be clamoring for this. They're going to want this to hold up. They're going to want Diego to be able to do that because it's going to help reinvigorate their programs, right? JUCO recruiting used to be massive. I mean, when I was coming up in the early 2010s, even prior to me, East Mississippi Junior College, those Kansas Junior Colleges, the Mississippi Junior Colleges, like there's a ton of talent. I'll tell you, I played better talent week to week in JUCO than I did at the FCS or G5 level. Even some of the, the
I used to call it at Northwest Mississippi Community College. I see that. I see the talent. I understand
it. Especially along like the defensive line and the offensive line and some of those wide receivers. Quarterback play is not the greatest, but the running backs, wide receivers, the offense and defensive linemen, especially in Mississippi and Kansas and some of the Texas schools, you're going to find diamonds, man. We just talked about it. Bill Belichick is recruiting the number 1 JUCO running back out of Kansas. So if you're able to say that these years aren't adding against your NCAA clock, which I think is a somewhat fair argument. I mean, it's a totally different style of ball. You're only playing 8 games. I believe it's a 9-game regular season. You have different rules. You're only allowed to have so many players on the roster. For teams like Mississippi JUCOs, you only get 8 out-of-state players, so it severely limits the opportunity for out-of-state players to come play. There's so many factors that go into JUCO ball that I can kind of see the argument that can hold up in court to where this is not the typical Division I NCAA, even NC2A. When you're talking about the Division II schools, it's not the same road. So that'll be interesting because I would love the ban. And I was like, hell, if this holds up, I'm going to file and see if I can get one more year.
Go make some NIL money.
Still me some NIL money, man. I'll be a backup. I can go.
Man, you'll be you'd be Udonis Haslam. Yeah, that's what you would be.
It's so funny though because
Udonis Haslam in the O-line room.
You know who else this would impact majorly? College baseball and college basketball. This would affect them because college baseball and college basketball are far more heavy into the JUCO recruiting than college football is at the top. So if this is able to hold up, college basketball programs and college baseball programs are going to be looking at it because especially baseball JUCO is damn near as respected as Division I JUCOs. I mean, they have a ton of talent that gets drafted directly from the JUCO system. So this could be a major play for everybody across the board in NCAA athletics.
Well, and it's kind of funny because, like, generally, and we've sort of gotten away from this thought as the years have gone along. But I think most people assume, like, JUCO, you had shitty grades, you should be punished for that. Like, you didn't. No, that's not why people go to JUCO. That's not why everybody goes to JUCO. At least there's a lot of cases of that, sure. But there's some cases where you're a late bloomer and you want to take your shot instead of going and settling on a D2 or D3 school. Hey, let me go see if I can develop in JUCO for a couple of years at this level of football and see if something can happen. So I think I kind of agree with you. I don't think that those years should necessarily be held against guys when it comes to their eligibility long-term at FBS football. It's not the same thing. It's not even close to the same.
And even baseball
doesn't operate under the same umbrella even. So it's not an NCAA sanctioned football game that you're playing in. It is JUCO, NJCAA to be exact. So it's completely different. The only thing I will say, there is there's consequences to everything. Consequences to every action. For every action, there's a reaction. This further sort of hurts the lower level high school recruit, right? I mean, this continues to sort of rain on their parade. You have 3- and 2-star guys that with, transfer portal and extra years of eligibility have been sort of screwed already and snubbed already because they're getting passed over because, hey, I have this guy that's already ready to go. JUCO recruits are a lot more ready to go than guys coming out of high school. So I think it further pushes down high school recruiting, in the grand scheme of things. And I think that's something we need to pay attention to. if this comes to pass, if this holds.
Yeah, I think that is an interesting perspective, but I do think it also encourages some of those kids to go the JUCO route, knowing that it won't count against their NCAA clock.
Sure.
So I think that could be a factor where you go and develop a couple years. I mean, normal students do it. They go to a couple years at JUCO, figure it out, and then they go to school and, getting back to those rules. I mean,
but let's be honest, though, Kai, JUCO is not a glamorous route, brother.
It's not.
You have to decide ahead of time. Like I know what you're saying. Like it could push them to JUCO and take advantage of that. Like that is not an easy life. You know it firsthand.
It's not. But I will say it'll make a man out of you, and I think it'll benefit those kids that are able to stick with it because, like you just said, those JUCO kids. If you make it through that 2 year or 1 year, because if you're a qualifier, you can go have one good season and leave after one season. So if you are able to make it through that grind and produce on the field against some really good, talented players, it'll be beneficial for you because those college coaches will know this kid is ready to play and I'll have this amount of years, man. So, and it'll be a situation where some of these kids were preferred walk-ons. I was saying like with some of the baseball kids, they go JUCO because they're able to get full scholarships to JUCOs as opposed to not being able to get a full scholarship at a major Division I program. I think people think that all sports are equally divvied up in terms of scholarship money when you could be at a Division I program in the SEC and be on a 60% scholarship. So a lot of kids go JUCO route because it pays for everything. Same with college. If you're a guy that only has D2 offers, you may be getting, partial scholarship, half scholarship. You can go play football at the JUCO ranks to get a full scholarship and it doesn't count against your clock. So like you said, there's an equal and opposite reaction for every encounter. And I think that there's a ton of positive and some drawbacks, like you just said. But overall, I think it will be a great thing for young players and maybe some of those young kids that you talk about in high school to have an opportunity to figure it out. And at the very least, if you don't end up getting to that G5 or FBS level or Power 4 level, you still get to play some college football and get an education. And I think that can probably be the balancing factor in all of this.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it all plays out. But I am looking at the clock, and we have gone long with our first segment, so we need to go ahead and grab a break. And when we come back, we will get directly to Mountain West Conference Commissioner Gloria Nevarez. She's next.
Some of y'all done lost y'all goddamn mind when it comes down to Gigi Jackson, bro. A 6'9" athletic scoring machine guard. Did things that only Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, Michael Jordans of the world had done as a rookie, right? We watched him doing this in real time last season. And there are people saying that this guy won't be a rotation player. There's no need to make him a rotation player. Let him play in the G League. Young players come into the league and they're thrown into the fire, man. We've seen in this offense, Jalen Wells, who's a rookie, look good in this offense. Santi Aldama, who struggled a lot last year, looks good in this offense. Jake LaRaga looks good in this offense. What the hell do y'all think Gigi Jackson is going to look like in this offense, man? A 6'8", 6'9", athletic 3-4 you can throw the ball to him above the rim. He can knock down shots. He can get to the basket on his own. It's just a bunch of nonsense conversation, bro.
Tune in to The Anthony Sane Show, Wednesdays and Fridays at 12 p.m. weekly on the Bluff City Media YouTube channel.
Did you see Klay Thompson at the end of the game, the walking around the court?
No.
You didn't see it?
Thank God, no.
I'm so happy you did. Like, they're trying to do the interview, like he walks all the way to half court, to the middle of with the mask thing, just walks around it. Does like the big exhilaration thing. Just goes to the free throw. But they're waiting.
They're waiting to interview him.
Yeah, you know how the same way as with Laura trying to help you get the interview. He does like this is the free throw line. Air. And then goes and does the interview.
He is such a tool.
Oh man, I wish you would have seen it. I wish you would have. It would have been. You would have loved it. I can't wait till you look it up later. Do you tell me?
Can't stand Klay Thompson.
Tune in to the Night Court Podcast with your hosts, Rob Fisher and Brevin Knight, on the Bluff City Media YouTube channel.
We are pleased to be joined by the commissioner of the Mountain West Conference. How about it? Very pleased to be joined by Gloria Nevarez. Gloria, how are you?
Good. How are you?
I am doing well. Now, I have to ask you, have you gotten time to breathe this year? This year, more than other years, seems like it's been a pretty busy one for not just you, just for all conference commissioners. And really, past 3, 4, 5 years with NIL and expansion and everything else, it has been absolutely nuts your way, it feels like.
Yeah. All commissioners, all presidents, all ADs, all student athletes. It's just been crazy.
Yeah, 100%. Now holler at me real quick. I just want to hop right into it. Have you gotten to sort of relax a little bit on the expansion talks? I know you guys had UC Davis. Hawaii's a full-time member now. You're dealing with things outside of your control, but have you gotten to sort of step back for a second, or are these going to be ongoing conversations the entire offseason?
Well, it's funny because conference expansion and membership used to be a once every decade conversation, and now it's our everyday. But for the immediate, we're in a really good place. We have our 8 minimum for FBS, and our current membership is committed and, signed a grant to rights. So we're feeling, to your point, stable, at least until the next 32, 22.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens. But have you gotten to enjoy yourself a little bit? Because you guys have had some really good things happen for your conference. You've had obviously the new members, but Boise State in the college football playoff with a bye game. I know that they have other conference affiliations on the way, but right now under the Mountain West Conference umbrella, they are the number 3 seed heading into the college football playoff. Have you gotten to enjoy a little bit of that?
Well, certainly our football champ game that was hosted up at Boise State was one of the best football champ games we've ever had. It was packed. It was exciting. It had so much meaning given the expanded playoff. And so, that is kind of the hallmark of the Mountain West. Schools come in and they may be at the bottom of the league, but those that do really well end up moving along the spectrum. I mean, Utah used to be in the league, TCU, BYU, like we kind of pride ourselves on being that pipeline for student athletes, coaches, administrators, and schools.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, can you kind of talk about what it means to potentially have a national champion come from the Mountain West this season? We know the previous engagements they're going to be going on in the coming years, but that's a possibility for the Mountain West. How do you leverage that or use that to your benefit in the short time that you have this national spotlight?
Well, let's take that back a step. The reason Boise State, in addition to all the great work the coaches and student athletes did on the field, all credit to them. But there is an access point in the expanded CFP that the commissioner prior to me, Craig Thompson, and his colleagues at the time fought really hard for. Decades, they've been advocating on an expanded playoff and having that access point and making our conference championships and regular seasons relevant. And so when that selection happened, I text Craig immediately. I'm like, this is your legacy. You created this doorway. Boise State came thundering through, and it was just amazing. And it is a testament to the value that all of FBS brings to the playoff. Now, whenever you have a playoff, you see it in all the other sports, there's always debate about those who got in and those who didn't. But we had a deserving team. Is the Mountain West always going to be in that spot? No, but we couldn't have been more pleased to know that regardless of which way our champ game went, we were going to have a team in the playoff. We were very, very fortunate this year. And to your point, we sung about that from the mountaintops.
Yep, 100%. Now, what do you think about the future of that spot in the college football playoff? Obviously, there's a bunch of discussion out there. You have Alabama left out. The SEC is probably a little perturbed by that. But what do you think about the future of that spot for the group of 5 continuing to be able to fight for a national championship?
Well, even back when we had BCS, first iterations of CFP, whoever's left out is yelling the loudest, and
Right.
that will be us, I'm sure, someday. It has been in the past because recall, there were some teams in the Mountain West that were left out, some very prominent teams, and that's when public pressure and then we talked about a different system because of that. Same thing, just go in a different direction. And so I think it ebbs and flows, and it depends on, what side of the argument you're on. But I think that's healthy debate, as I think we've continued to improve, make more inclusive. And how exciting was selection and the debate leading up to this year's selection.
Yep.
Regardless of whether you were happy or not happy, the attention, the passion by the fans and the media, leading up to selection was, I think, great for the sport.
Now, let me ask you this. What do you think about the athletes themselves? I have to ask you about Ashton Jeanty, second in Heisman voting, the running back there at Boise State. And it was as close as it's ever been, really, in the Heisman race between him and Travis Hunter. I think the closest race since 2009. He was just as deserving as a guy who won, it seemed.
I totally biased, and I'll admit that. And I thought
right.
I really did. I thought if I had a vote, he was my guy.
Yeah.
But again, all credit to the other folks in the candidate pool, but I really thought he stood out significantly.
I'm happy you said that. That one, you said you were on the outside looking in, you'd be fighting for your teams to get in. And two, that, hey, I'm a little bit biased here. I would vote for my guy to get the Heisman. I appreciate that because a lot of admin, they'll get up there, they'll try to virtue signal, or they'll try to play both sides, or play down the middle.
Maybe be a little political. I hear it. Yeah.
Leading up to selection, we were saying all the things and making all the arguments. Once the die is cast, props to the winner. But I thought our guy had a.
I have a question about your education background. You are extremely accomplished in that realm. You have a Juris Doctorate degree from UC Berkeley. How did you get into sports? How are you now running a conference as the commissioner of a conference that is probably the most prestigious G5 conference in the Mountain West?
I started at UMass, where I majored in sport management. Had no idea what it was at the time, and really just kind of loved the track. I loved my professors. And, when I went to law school, I knew I wanted to be in sports somehow, didn't know what that looked like. And when I was in law school at Cal, I went down to the athletic department, and this was early days, like databases were :/text, right?
Yeah.
And there was a one-man shop. His name was Dan Coonan, and he was running all of compliance for about 400 student athletes, it was insane. It was early days. I said, do you need help? He's like, yes. And because he was a lawyer, I got externship credit for working in the Cal compliance department.
Okay.
And I thought, this is cool. I can kind of use the law background, but stay close to college athletics. And I had a cup of coffee in a labor litigation firm and then jumped ship, took a 50% pay cut, jumped ship, and never looked back.
Yep. Awesome. And you were an athlete as well, correct? Back in the day.
Yes, I played basketball.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how was that, and how much did that sort of experience make you want to sort of pursue sports after your career?
Very much so, in that I loved, I wasn't an All-American by any means. I sat a lot of bench. Sure. But what I loved about that time in your life, those collegiate years, as you know, being part of a team is so special. You learn so much. It's so formative, whether you're winning or losing. Like, it's such a valuable supplement to your higher education, and that as you're developing who you are as a young adult. And I just love that college athletics grabs that, has a role in that part of your life. I mean, it's something that I'm honored to have been able to experience, and, just forms who I am.
Yep, 100%. Now, times were a lot different back then, though, as far as, you just got your scholarship, and then, there was no NIL, there was no revenue sharing, there's none of this stuff. With all of the changes in college athletics, obviously NIL is being latched onto by a lot of your membership. Let me know, because at the Group of Five level, this is a different topic altogether, the revenue sharing topic with the House NCAA settlement. How are you guys planning on handling that? And I'm sure you're still having internal conversations about it.
Yeah. And as you know, there's a gap between us and them. And we're not talking about all in at 20 million. That's just not who we are. But we're going to be in. We're going to be competitive because that's who we are. Right-sized to what we can do to maintain competitiveness. And so the problem or the challenge for us right now is that we need answers on what being in means if you're not a defendant to the lawsuit, if you're not at the max level, doing all the things. Now, our folks are raising money, setting up
Sure.
infrastructure to the best they can, but there's still a lot of answers that we need to receive from the settlement itself. And of course, a lot of folks involved in it are being advised not to talk about it until it's inked.
Right.
But also, the point at which we can participate or not is coming up pretty quickly. So there's a lot of angst in the system, but we're ready once we figure out what it is and what we need to do to participate.
Mm-hmm.
Can you kind of talk to me about what you guys are doing to kind of maybe mitigate some of those issues that could come, or just to bolster the current revenue streams that you do have? I know Gabe is a Memphis alum, and they had a revolutionary FedEx deal where they partnered with FedEx.
Shout out.
Then Jacksonville State here, we have this new growth initiative where they're starting at 3 different levels. They're starting local, they're raising money on the grand scale from donors, and they're doing like in-school programs to kind of help the athletes and incentivize them that way. Are you guys in the building or in the meetings on some of these with these schools specifically, or is it just a conference-wide plan where you just give them maybe a guideline or a how-to manual?
Well, certainly our schools are doing all those things at the different levels, and I have all the information on what's going on, but I'm hearing things are moving in the right direction.
Right.
From a conference perspective, we control media rights, so we're going to market for those right now. We control conference brand, and we're an amplifier. So when there are great things happening, i.e. Boise State in the college football playoff or other wonderful things, we try to really raise brand, raise profile by amplifying those stories whenever we can. And then also looking at our own sponsorship offering, ticket sales, championships. But as you said, it's all about mining current and new sources of revenue,
Right.
Just, the challenge.
And one of the new sources of revenue that's been a talking point, and I think a rather contentious talking point, is private equity. And you see some peers over in the Big 12 sort of inching closer to that conversation with these league-wide sponsorships where you have the Big 12 with the naming rights to certain companies or what. But what do you think about that conversation where you could get private equity involved and basically fund yourself and your needs that way? Is that a sustainable thing? Is that something we need to get used to right now? And I need to hear from someone who would definitely be in the know.
Well, and I had to educate myself. I had a lot of meetings with private equity folks, the folks tangential to that, just learning about the space. And what I've learned is there's no one size fits all. There's traditional private equity, what you see in private sector, and then you have a bunch of companies interested in getting in our space because there's a feeling of there being a lot of untapped revenue because of the inefficiencies of how we have different leagues competing against each other, unlike a pro model under one umbrella. So I get the interest from private equity into our space. I've also heard some of the larger leagues saying, hey, why do we need outside folks to do what we could already do internally? But it also comes with additional revenue. However, you may lose some operational control. So what I've learned to date is, it's not the same. Every deal is not the same. It depends on, both sides of the table, what you're looking for and how you're going to build it. But I think for us, the Mountain West, it is influx of additional revenue balanced by how much or how little control we are comfortable having.
Right. And I think most people, when you hear private equity, you feel like full control goes to the people giving the money, and you have to balance those things out, have those conversations ahead of time.
Right. And now as I think some of the first generations or iterations of that have had some pushback from organizations like leagues, I think they're starting to morph, and maybe they're a little bit more in the middle, joint control, or maybe not all operational control or something like that, all the way down to the other end of the spectrum where it's just maybe a favorable loan. So it's, again, not one size fits all. And I think folks are kind of having those conversations to see what is out there. I think at the Mountain West, we are very much rooted in, and again, this is how we're built and who we are, large public institutions, pride in being accessible education to the community, student athlete graduation, welfare, health, DEI efforts, and a lot of those things we don't want to lose control of. So we've proceeded cautiously as we explore that space.
Awesome. Well, we've talked a lot about the landscape changing all the time. And one of the ways that the landscape could change in the future has been broached a couple of times on national levels, and it's kind of raised my eyebrows a little bit, is the idea of a group of 5 playoff, the idea of the Super League branching off and you taking the biggest teams from the SEC, Big 10, ACC, Big 12, and maybe a Boise State, because I think a Boise State has a strong enough brand and a strong enough competitive group on the field that maybe they could play with some of the big boys consistently. Maybe they branch off and have their own league. It's been broached and it's been talked about by the big boys in the SEC and the Big 10. Are you in favor of a Group of 5 playoff if that were to happen, or would you be in favor of trying to take one of your higher profile teams and get them in a super league like that? Or is this where you want to be at and this is where you think this is where the bread is buttered?
Well, as we started, it's all about the CFP and having a pathway into the CFP. We don't want to do anything to jeopardize that. That is where we're focused and direction. After that, I think there's a lot of opportunity because the bowl season, clearly, bowls have value. We have great bowl partners, but as we're seeing kind of in this current environment, something's got to give because it's not healthy for either student athletes to have to make transfers or teams to try to field full squads and the bowls themselves to not know who's going to be in and who's going to be at full tilt. So something's got to change there. If it were more organized to have some kind of secondary merit-based model behind the CFP, I would be all about that. But I would never want to divide all of FBS into subcategories in order to do that.
Now, I know you probably have no one answer to this, but I just want to get your thoughts. Who gets all of this and everybody in FBS and everybody in Division I, who gets it all sort of figured it out all together, where you have NIL the same, you have just a structure, like a genuine structure for UL Monroe or Boise State and Alabama. Everybody's operating somewhat by the same rules. Like, is there one entity you think can do that?
Can, should, is. Those are three different questions.
Sure, I guess. I guess so.
And so right now, the Big 10 SEC are taking the lead through the entity that is CFP. And I've always felt the CFP is the room because that's where all 10 FBS leagues are represented. We meet regularly. All the issues come through there. All the media rights come through there. And so I think that is the room, and that's where it's going to be decided. But largely for factors outside our control, like the House litigation and everything else, the SEC and Big 10 are taking the lead in a lot of that. And so I think once we get through the chaos, I'm hopeful, optimistic that we do have some, okay, this is how it works, but we need to get the details behind the House settlement. We need to live in it in a minute to really figure it out.
All right, now final thing for the Mountain West Commissioner Gloria Nevarez. We've had ADs, we've had coaches, we've had players, we've had everybody under the sun. You're our first commissioner though on the podcast, so this is phenomenal. We need to ask you what's your schedule like on a day-to-day basis? Do you ever get time to relax, step away for a second, enjoy yourself, maybe take a vacation, or is it just all hands on deck all the time? You have to be by the phone, on call, ready to go.
Well, certainly during the academic year, because, that's when all of our sports are in full tilt. And so I know a lot of folks are focused on football and basketball, but we have a ton of other sports operating at the same time, culminating in championship events that we run.
Sure.
Our schedule does get a little bit quieter during the holidays because the schools go on break, but still we're in bowl season and, champs wind up and getting ready for spring. So we really don't it used to be summer was our time to take a breath, but even now, it seems like something's always happening.
Yeah, there's something always happening. There's no doubt about it. And there will be something happening relatively soon when you get to see one of your members play in the college football playoff in Boise State, and obviously a bunch of bowl games as well. But we appreciate you carving out time from that busy schedule and joining us for a little bit, Gloria. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and I'm honored to be the first commissioner.
Yeah, absolutely. She is Mountain West Commissioner Gloria Nevarez.
Some of y'all done lost y'all goddamn mind when it comes down to GG Jackson, bro. A 6'9" athletic scoring machine guard. Did things that only Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, Michael Jordans of the world had done as a rookie, right? We watched him doing this in real time last season. And there are people saying that this guy won't be a rotation player. There's no need to make him a rotation player. Let him play in the G League. Young players come into the league and they're thrown into the fire, man. we've seen in this offense, Jalen Wells, who's a rookie, look good in this offense. Santi Aldama, who struggled a lot last year, looks good in this offense. Jake LaRavia looks good in this offense. What the hell do y'all think GG Jackson is going to look like in this offense, man? A 6'8", 6'9", athletic, 3'4", you can throw the ball to him above the rim. He can knock down shots. He can get to the basket on his own. It's just a bunch of nonsense conversation, bro.
Tune in to The Anthony Sane Show, Wednesdays and Fridays at 12 p.m. weekly on the Bluff City Media YouTube channel.
Did you see Klay Thompson at the end of the game,
No.
walking around the court?
No.
You didn't see it?
Thank God, no.
I'm so happy you did. Like, they're trying to do the interview, like he walks all the way to half court, to the middle of with the mask thing, just walks around it. Does like the big exhilaration thing. Just goes to the free throw. They're waiting.
They're waiting to interview him.
Yeah, you know how the same way as
Yeah.
with Laura trying to help you get the interview. He does like this is the free throw line. Air. And then goes and does the interview.
He is such a tool.
Oh man, I wish you would have seen it. I wish you would have. It would have been. You would have loved it. I can't wait till you look it up later. Do you tell me?
Can't
about it.
stand Klay Thompson.
Tune in to the Night Court Podcast with your hosts, Rob Fisher and Brevin Knight, on the Bluff City Media YouTube channel.
Back in, appreciate Gloria Nevarez carving some time out of her busy schedule. But now that she's off, we knew she was not going to be able to comment on this. Let's get to the Mountain West Conference lawsuit.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead and get into this. This was interesting. And this was, I believe, earlier this week. Boise State ended up joining in regards to the lawsuit of schools that have left. There was an addendum and a contract that a lot of these Mountain West Conference schools that left for the Pac-12, they signed, and there was an addendum in it that said, if you leave before the contract is up, you're going to have to pay a poaching penalty of some sort.
Yeah.
19 million to 38 million per school. They're trying to fight that out in court, so they don't have to pay that. They say it's against antitrust laws and it's non-competitive, whatever. They did sign the contract in which this was an addendum, so they definitely had their legal team read it over ahead of time. What do you think about this? I mean, do you think this gets thrown out, or are they going to have to pay this type of money to the Mountain West to make the Mountain West richer on their escape? Because it feels like to me, if you had pen to paper on a contract that agreed to these terms, you should have to go ahead and agree to those terms. You should pay that. You should pay the money that you agreed that you would pay if you did get poached or left.
Yeah, I agree. And especially when you look at the overall ramifications, right? Like those teams going to the Pac-12, they're going to have a secure TV deal. They're going to have those amenities. They're going to have
Well, they're going to have to get another full-time member, but yeah.
Right. Yeah. But I mean, they're going to figure that out. They're going to be able to sell that much more than a Mountain West Conference sans Boise State and some of those major teams will. There's been talk of UNLV branching off and joining, a different conference. So there's a lot of talk going on right now. And if, like you said, the paperwork is the paperwork. At the very least, it's worth filing the lawsuit. I mean, I think it's 100% worthy to try to fight it. But like you said, if the pen's been put to paper already, Mountain West has every right to fight tooth and nail to get that money,
Yes.
because they're going to need it in this ever-changing landscape of college football, and it's only fair in my opinion. Especially
So this is Boise State, Colorado State, and Utah State right now against the Mountain West to not pay a $19 million to $38 million poaching fee for heading to the Pac-12.
I mean, that's arguably
I do think this is just nonsense, though. Like all of this, the Pac-12 Mountain West realignment is still just beyond me. And I know we talked about it earlier in the season. It's just annoying, man. You could have just no money paid, no hard feelings. Let's join forces. Add Oregon State, Washington State. Call it a damn day.
Yep.
That's what you did this year. It didn't make it's fine. It's fine.
I agree. I'm with you.
It's ridiculous. Now, moving on, we do have some things we have to discuss in regards to bowl season, as we normally do. We've had opt-outs. We've had games get canceled because of COVID. But now we have a game that's supposed to be played on December 28th with a team that completely opted out because their coach is no longer there. Marshall ended up opting out of the Independence Bowl against Army, the number 22 team in the country, because they didn't have a full team because they're all in the transfer portal. First of all, I want to place some blame on Marshall for not getting a deal done with Charles Huff.
Yeah,
that team loved him. Basically, the whole team. They got in the
Just won the
transfer
conference
portal after the fact. He won a conference championship game. He's been solid every single year. They tried to do some PR and say, well, he denied a contract extension last year, and that's why we're in this position right now. We'll offer him a better one, try to keep him around. That's not going to happen. It looks like Southern Miss is going to be his landing spot, I believe, which is insane to me. Marshall's completely screwing this up. But also it does bring to my attention the calendar. Of course, the calendar. Obviously, with Charles Huff out, transfer portal open for 30 days. But even outside of that, the transfer portal opens for 30 days right now. Now. The winter transfer portal window is December 9th through 28th, which is right in the bowl season. And I just have to ask the question, is it time to reevaluate? Because you talk to players, this is not a good thing. Bo Perbula from Penn State, the backup quarterback who got in the transfer portal, he put out, I had to make an impossible decision to play in the playoff, try to see that through, or get in the transfer portal now and not be able to see it through. And he decided to get in the transfer portal now because he wants his career to be successful in the future. But players don't seem to like it. Coaches seem to struggle with it. Feels like universities seem to struggle with it. I don't know if there's a great answer, but it feels like you could push it till after bowl season or just use the spring window and open it up for 15 more days. It seems like there's some ways around this, and we're not really thinking outside the box here to fix this problem that we have seen.
Yeah, I mean, it's not just affecting G5 programs either. You look at a program like USC that I cover, they've lost 19 guys to the portal already, and that hasn't even factored in the NFL guys that are probably going to opt out of that bowl game. So you have guys like Woody Marks that have declared for the NFL draft, Emmanuel Pignon that's declared for the NFL draft. They're going to be a roster that's probably 25 to 30 guys down, going to play SEC Texas A&M that's pissed off they didn't finish the season the way they should have. That's going to be a situation where maybe that team isn't going to be able to field a respectable ball club. So it's affecting everybody in college football right now. Like you just said, the kid from Penn State, the Perbula kid, he wasn't a guy that was just on the roster. He's a guy that was used heavily.
He had to start a game.
Yeah, he was used heavily in their red zone packages, their short yardage packages when they need to, get a quarterback run in there. He was a guy that played and contributed. So it's a tough situation. Even a guy like Preston Stone at SMU, he wasn't starting anymore, but he's a guy that is a backup. If Kevin Jennings were to get hurt at any point in this playoff run, he was going to be a guy that has a ton of experience, a ton of talent that could come in and contribute. And I don't know if he was able to stay or not through the playoff run, but he's a guy that had to make a decision. He committed to Northwestern today. So he's a guy that had to probably potentially leave a college football playoff team as well that just played in the ACC title game. So like you said, there's the ways around it. I know Joel Klatt, the Fox analyst, said he proposes moving all the games up a week and finishing the season around January 5th being the national title game, and everybody being able to have a little bit more time in the window directly after that, which will give them about a week and a half, 2 weeks before school starts, which seems like a crazy time crunch anyway. But I like the idea of just doing it in the spring window and extending it to 45 days instead of 30 days.
Yes, it's just a lot more like just looking at it for the overall health of college football and the bowl season and postseason, the overall health, there's way more cons than there is pros to keeping the winter portal open. I just think there's ways around this, and it's not that complicated.
Yeah, it'll clear up the mid season college signing day too. It'll make that a lot clearer because those guys can have their spots. They'll have that figured out, and it'll end up making the transfer portal spring window much easier for some of these college programs because they'll know where we have guys, where we don't have guys. I don't have to wait or play the scholarship.
I mean, you could really go 15 days at the beginning of spring and then 30 days after spring.
Yeah,
it's just ways around this. It seems easy. It seems easy to me. Now, speaking of the transfer portal, we've had some pretty interesting movement already. I want to start with this one. Caden Salter to Colorado, man.
Yeah, man.
Caden Salter from Liberty to Colorado. They end up getting the commitment from him. He's been phenomenal at Liberty for the past 3 years. And looking at Dion, I mean, the guy has a 9-3 season after that team was 1-11 2 years ago. And now you're going to go from Shedeur Sanders, likely to Caden Salter to Juju Lewis, the 5-star freshman coming in next year. I mean, this succession plan, what he has built, the steadiness of it at this point, it's pretty damn impeccable and impressive.
Yeah, and Colorado, if we're starting with them, man, Caden Salter is a great addition because even if he doesn't end up being the starter, it is probably the best backup plan you could have in the country. I mean, if we're going to see some dual quarterback options with Juju Lewis and Caden Salter, but they weren't just able to get some offensive guys. They went out and got Jaheim Otis from Alabama, who was projected to be a top 75 draft pick this season. They went out and got, I'm drawing a blank on the kid's name, but he's a beast of a defensive tackle from Fresno State, had a ton of offers. They're in the running for KC Concepcion, the star wide receiver from North Carolina State. Alabama transfer, 5-star tight end / wide receiver Caleb Odom just posted the buff sign on his Twitter. He just took a visit there. He played with Juju Lewis in high school. So they have a ton of momentum in the transfer portal. And like you said, man, it speaks to where, there's been so much speculation about, is Prime going to leave? Is he going to do this? Is he going to do that? They have a very clear plan in place. They're setting it up for the long term there in Colorado. And a lot of people from the Alabamas of the world are taking place and they're taking notice because they're starting to get those guys in trenches, in meaningful spots. So I'm interested to see that. They also got another kid on the offensive line that just transferred over from Iowa. So they have some guys that are really good players, really good pedigree, that are starting to take notice, and they're building for the long term there.
Yep. I can't get over the price tags on some of these guys, though. Caden Salter probably got a fair amount of money, but there's one guy in particular that I have to point to, and he committed to a school in your state, Auburn. Jackson Arnold, former 5-star recruit, was supposed to be the next guy at Oklahoma. We saw that didn't work out. He gets to the transfer portal, commits to Hugh Freeze in Auburn. Have you heard the price tag there? I've heard anywhere for 1 year, for at least 1 year, the 1 year valuation from $2.5 to $3 million. And then you look at Darian Mensah, who transferred from Tulane to Duke. Duke's now paying a whole lot of money to go get a crazy quarterback, a good quarterback in the transfer portal. Was it $5 million over 2 years? I heard for a guy like that. It is unbelievable to see the amount of money that these guys are getting. And I like, the more we're pushing up this price, the more likely it is we see guys that are draft eligible that could be day 2, day 3 picks staying in college for another year to see what can happen.
Yeah, even a kid like Carson Beck, he hasn't made a decision yet, but he has another year to come back. If he wanted to come back and make some, $2 to $3 million at Georgia to run it back again, who could tell him no? So I think it's interesting to see these numbers thrown around. And I just, when you look at the kid, Bryce Underwood from Michigan, if he's getting that type of deal, I know he's a 5-star, he's a big recruit, but if he's getting that type of 3 to 4 year package, it makes sense that some of these guys, it doesn't make sense in terms of the price tag, but it makes sense in terms of the market, right? Like the market is incredibly inflated. But man, these are the numbers that we're going to be used to seeing. And even Auburn, they spent that money on a kid like Jackson Arnold. They still went out and secured Ashton Daniels today from Stanford, a kid that played and started for Stanford this season, is going to commit there to be the backup. And I'm sure he's not doing it for anything less than close to $1 million. So there's going to be a lot of interesting things here. Are these investments going to stick? Are they going to be worth it? 1, 2, are we going to continue to see this investment from the collectives, from the universities with revenue sharing coming if they're not producing on the field? So there's a lot of collateral damage that's going to happen if these players don't pan out. But regardless, I think we're going to see a little bit of a leveling out of the playing field here.
Some of these guys, it's absolute love, though. Like I look at a guy like Barryon Brown, who went from Kentucky to LSU. He's going to have a chance to play with Garrett Nussmeier for another year. He's probably going to get fed the ball a whole lot, and he is really, really fast. He's a 4.3 guy. Wasn't able to do much at Kentucky. Probably a disappointment this past season, but that's because their whole passing game and their offense was a disappointment. He gets to go to LSU. He probably gets a way bigger payday, probably doubles his salary compared to what he was getting in Kentucky. And I think by the end of this whole thing, because he'll be a great tester by the time he goes to a combine and a pro day and to the all-star games after his senior season. He's probably going to boost his stock along with getting that type of that $1 million money. That's like, there is some situations where it is just so beneficial for these guys to make these moves, these money moves that they're making.
Yeah, 100%. And you look at a guy like Dane Key from Kentucky that just committed to Georgia. They need a guy like that can come in and catch those tunnel screens and those quick passes over the middle. Even a guy like Zachariah Branch, who just entered the portal from USC, he's going to demand a ton of money on the open market.
That's wild, Kai.
He's going to get, and it's a package deal with his brother. So his brother, who's a top 100 recruit, but I mean, he's going to command.
Lincoln is fumbling everything, though. Lincoln is fumbling everything at USC.
They have 19 guys out. not counting NFL guys, and they've only gotten 2 commits in this transfer portal cycle so far. So there's a ton of ground to make up, and I'm not sure they're going to be able to do it. But like you said, there's some players that are going to take full advantage of this opportunity in the transfer portal and come out better because of it.
All right, now let's do this real quick. Boise State, potential college football playoff matchups. They're going to be dealing with either SMU or Penn State. I think most people expect Penn State to go win that game. If SMU is able to spring the upset, I can give Boise State a chance in that game. I don't know if I see them stacking up against that Penn State defensive front the way they've been able to run the ball. Maddox Madsen only can provide certain things. I don't think he can provide those same things that he did against Mountain West competition against a team like Penn State, and we know it's going to be really hard to run on them. That would be the most stout front they saw all year. But Boise State getting the bye game, cool for them. I think we need to reevaluate that. I've talked about that. Don't think Boise State and Arizona State should get bye games just for winning their conference, but they do. And what do you think about Boise State and the hand they were dealt? This group of 5 team handed this SMU Penn State matchup. I thought it was about as good as they could have done.
Yeah, it's about as good as they could have done. And I don't know if I see them putting up much of a fight in terms of winning, but I think they can make it somewhat respectable. A 34-17 type of game, 41-21 type of game that, Penn State scores late. But like you said, man, it's going to be tough to score in that defense. Jeanty's going to have the type of game that people have been, I won't say hyping him up because he deserves it, but he's going to have a legendary game, and that still may not be enough. I think the biggest thing, we talked about some of their shortcomings offensively outside of Jeanty, but they haven't played an offense since Oregon with this type of dynamic ability with Drew Aller and those guys. And then the 2-headed monster running back with Nick Singleton and Katron Allen and that offensive line. And then you have a dynamic tight end who, for my money, is 1 or 2 with Colston Loveland from Michigan and Tyler Warren. It's just matchup nightmare for those teams. So I don't really see them being able to put up much of a fight. But I'm hoping to see a really good game. And I hope that Jeanty does give us a performance that's, memorable.
Now, I brought it up off the top of the show, but Memphis finished at 11-2. 11-2. We record this on a Wednesday, so on Tuesday they ended up beating West Virginia 42-37. Seth Hennigan went out with 104 passing touchdowns. That's top 14 all time. 14,000 passing yards. That's top 14 all time. The guy was phenomenal. This team ended up being pretty damn good. You trade in one of those UTSA or Navy losses for the Florida State win, and you're in a completely different conversation right now. You're in the AAC title game. But, I tried to put this out there, and I know it lacks nuance, Kai, but if I told a majority of the fan base in Memphis before the season, preseason, I say this team's going to have 11 wins, no one would ask questions. They'd be like, yes, sign me up. I'm in.
Right.
I'm in. But when you add nuance to it, I understand why people are still disappointed with 11-2, which is insane to say, but disappointed with 11 wins. You didn't make the AAC title game. You lost games you shouldn't have in bad spots. You did end up getting a nice win on the road against a top 20 Tulane team, which was great at the end of the year. But in the end of the day, it was a ho-hum regular 11-win season, if that's possible. Just sort of a workman-like 11-win season.
Yeah, shout out to Rock Taylor. He had a whale of a game.
He was great. He was great.
Anderson kid at running back did some great things, and of course Hennigan. But 11-2, man, it's a great season. But like you said, with some nuance attached to it, there were some 2 winnable football games that you could have had, and you could be looking at a 13-0 team here with potentially an AAC title game and hosting a playoff game. So, having a bye in a playoff game because we saw what Boise was able to do. So there's some meat left on the bone, but can't cry over spilled milk. I think that the best thing to do is to use that as motivation to say, hey, we're 11-2, but we still have so much more to go. We have,
and they're hammering the portal. They have Antoine Hill Jr. coming in. I saw that this is one I sort of want your opinion on. They brought in Matthew Sluka for a visit. The guy who left UNLV over NIL discrepancies and problems. I think that would be an interesting thing. I have called for this Memphis team in the transition from Seth Hennigan, life after Seth Hennigan. You have to go get a veteran, arm. You have to. You can't just assume Antoine Hill Jr. is going to step in as a true freshman and go make something happen. And even with that, what do you want to do with a true freshman? You want to push him a little bit, make him learn things. Let him learn from a vet who's done it before. I don't see anything wrong with bringing in a guy like Matt Sluka. Because here's the thing. I know he was unhappy with his NIL situation, but the NIL situation here in Memphis is a lot more stable than what's going on at UNLV right now. And I think in the end of the day, he's got 1 year of eligibility left.
Yep.
He's got no more red shirts left. So if he ended up at Memphis, he's at Memphis, riding or dying for a year. And I'm okay with that in the end of the day. But I think that's what they need to do. I think their running back room's going to be taken care of with Greg DeRosier Jr. Sutton Smith will be coming off an injury. They lost him second play of the game earlier this year. You're going to have a young, solid back who played a little bit this year in Makari Bodiford. I think he'll be good there. They've done some recruiting on the offensive line. Ethan Newman from Kennesaw State. They got some defensive line. Puda Walker from Kennesaw State. They're sort of rating that roster right now. It just feels like they're still headed in the right direction. You're just going to have to figure out life after the 4-year starting quarterback that you probably will never see again.
Yep. So I'm excited, man. Like you said, I'm all for the Sluka edition. I mean, you say what you want about the kid, but he's been a winner everywhere he's gone. It wasn't always the prettiest at UNLV, but they were sitting there at 4-0 when he took his last snap for them. So I think that'd be a worthy addition. So like you said, man, they're doing their job in the portal. They're doing their job recruiting high school wise. The NIL infrastructure seems to be set in place. It's all on, Coach Silverfield and those guys to keep the train rolling, to keep the talent coming in. And we talked to him, but 11-2 is a disappointment for some people. And I bet it's disappointing for him too. If he looks in the mirror and he's really reflective about it, he'll know that he wants to meat on the bone and try to go get it this next season.
But let's also, I want to bring this up real quick because I think this is a lesson for around the country. There's a difference between fans being angry and the donors and the money pushers being angry. The donors and the money pushers at Memphis are happy as they could possibly be right now.
Yeah.
Fans are mad because you're not in an AAC championship. But 11 wins, graduation rates high, GPA, getting them out in the community, doing the right things, off and on the fit, like that sells to the money pushers and the donors here at Memphis. Until they're out or unhappy with Ryan, this is not really a conversation that's all that worth having, in my opinion. You know what I mean? There's a 100%. Difference between fan opinion and the opinion behind closed doors, the people that actually matter in these conversations.
100%. I'm with you there. And as long as they're writing the checks and they're happy, everything else will fall in line, man. Like you said, if 11-2 is the floor and this is the disappointment season, you're looking at a team that's on the right trajectory. So I'm excited to see Memphis football in the future.
For sure. Well, Kai, where do they find you?
Find me on Twitter, X, whatever you call it, at Kyron Samuels, and you get everything else. A ton of stuff coming up with NFL, with the USC guys. Ton of stuff with Oregon getting ready to come up in their playoff push. So I'm excited to keep doing that stuff. And the NFL draft stuff is around the way. So like, share, subscribe, all that stuff. Gabe will be back on the radio soon. So happy to get Gabe back on the radio.
January 6th. Something else is going on in the country on that day. But I'll be back on January 6th to my normal Monday through Friday.
Appreciate you guys listening, as always.
Show 4 to 7, 92.9 ESPN. Follow me on Twitter or X at G_Coon71. Do you have a blue sky yet, Kai, by the way?
I do not. I'm going down with the shit.
I made the blue sky. I have not posted or done anything with it. I made it just to get ready. But I don't think Twitter or X, whatever the entity has been, it's been threatened a lot. It's never gone down.
Yeah, man.
Even though I don't like the direction it's headed with Elon.
Yeah, if Threads couldn't kill it, if Zuckerberg couldn't kill it, put a dent in it, I don't think anything ever will. So I'm stuck on the train until it goes down.
For sure. So follow me there, G_Coon71. Check me out on my other podcast here on the Bluff City Media and Believe Podcast Network. That would be On the Bluff. Comes out every single Tuesday at noon. But check it all out at bluffcitymedia.co. We have all the articles, podcasts up there. Go like, subscribe, do all that good stuff. But until next week, we will go ahead and say goodbye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of G5 Classified. If you enjoyed this episode, leave a rating and a review wherever you download your podcasts. To watch this episode, head over to the Bluff City Media YouTube channel. We'll see you back here next week.